Hi, I'm Rob Vanstone, and welcome to the latest edition of the Rumblings podcast. I am with, as always, Dr. Murray McCormick, our fine football writer who took one for the team on Saturday. He actually watched the Riders lose a 54-20 squeaker to the Blue Bombers in person. You seem to be still rather cheerful despite having been subjected. I missed a bike ride because of it. You had to endure it. What do you make of the state of the team coming out of that one? Keeping in mind that it is semi-miraculous, I suppose, that they were even able to field a team considering how sick everybody was.
And that's the part that I keep going back to, is how sick everybody was. I still watched that first quarter, aware there were some issues, and we still hadn't really been sorted out yet. And to see them get what they ran, 2 offensive plays.
Yeah, they did not throw a pass in the first quarter. I don't think that's happened since there were flying wings.
And the Bombers had the ball for 13 minutes. They only scored 6 points, but that's because they missed the convert.
And then quickly got to 13 early in the second quarter.
I've never seen a Rider team be that inept on offense. I mean, actually, inept's even a strong word, because who knew they were on offense? They only had 2 plays.
Yeah, well,
it just was. And then, you and I
you didn't watch the 79 Roughriders.
Okay, well, I probably remember
that
them,
fine day in Montreal when they had 6 first downs. That wonderful day when they held the Calgary Stampeders to 6 points and lost because they scored 5 points. So, wow. But you weren't living here at the time, so we'll throw you a mulligan.
Okay, they have been worse. But then the Blue Bombers go on to score, and I mentioned this, 9 of their 10 possessions, and the only possession they didn't score on was a punt. I think they felt sorry for the Riders.
And the punt was released with 2:40 left in the fourth quarter.
Fourth quarter, okay. And I know some people have brought up the fact that maybe the Blue Bombers were running up the score on the Riders. And I never thought of that once. They had guys in there that were trying to play. It was almost like an exhibition game by that time. Let them run your offense, run what you're going to do. If you think they're running up the score on you, then just stop them once. And they never stopped them once, which still is mind-boggling. Oh, sorry, for the punt. We'll give them the stop for the punt. I'm sorry about that.
But what became of this championship defense? How sick was the defense? We've heard a lot about the offensive line and how sick the offensive linemen were. Justin McInnes couldn't play. Keon Schaefer-Baker couldn't play because he was under the weather. So I think it's pretty well documented how sick the offense was. I mean, they were bringing in a backup quarterback the night before, and Jake Hardy was an emergency starter, etc. We haven't heard as much about how the defense was affected.
But there were a lot of
factor for that. I mean, other than Jeremy Clark.
Well, they made a number of position changes. Mari Henderson went to who went to corner? Okay, Nelson Lacombo came in. I'm trying to remember this off the top.
Lacombo went to corner, and then
corner. Henderson went to halfback. Clark was out. I can't remember who took over for Clark. No, Milligan was already in.
Adam was already in.
This makes me look really bad. Yeah, but it was confusing. Like, we got the roster changes a minute before kickoff.
It was basically Lacombo filling the spot in the secondary for Clark, with Henderson moving over.
Yeah, it was. So they didn't have. That's right. I said they didn't have as many guys that we knew were ill, but there were still 15 guys. And how do we know how they felt on the sideline? But can you imagine being on the bus? What that bus ride was over, like, with guys supposedly throwing up on the bus ride over too, and then being in that locker room and what it was like with guys battling, coming out of both ends. Oh, like I know we look at the personnel wise, we didn't think the defense was affected, but I think it had to have a huge mental effect on them, seeing your teammates being that sick and IVs before a game that you kind of thought was a must win. So I'm willing to give the whole team a mulligan, Rob. They still
or
lost.
A milligan. Do you give a milligan?
They still lost. It was still a horrible loss, and but let's give them one on this one, and hopefully they come back with a better effort against the Elks on Friday and sort of get things set up.
You know what, Mur? As bizarre as it might sound, and they've just given up more points than they had since August 3rd, 2000, when they gave up 62 in Montreal. And the disparity is the largest since they lost 53-7 in Hamilton in 2016. Chris Jones was the coach then. But I came out of that game thinking there might be a semblance of hope in that despite all that, the special teams played pretty well. Mario Alford had his 3rd kick return touchdown in only 8 games as a Rough Rider. And And Cody at one point was with 15 for 16, and the only incompletion was a drop. And yet I heard people phoning in on the post-game shows complaining about Cody. Like, was he supposed to catch the one pass that wasn't caught out of the first 16? So I think if you look at Cody the last 3 games, you can say, okay, that is coming around. It looks like he had hit rock bottom in the game where he was pulled. But since then, I think he's played pretty well. So I think you can look at 2/3 of that the facets of the game for the Roughriders and say, even considering the circumstances they faced, they performed pretty commendably. And it was the offense, I think, that you could say quite safely, that was in worse condition than the defense in terms of the illness. But that defense, my goodness.
They couldn't get a stop.
Yeah.
They couldn't get a stop. And we kept thinking, if they get a stop here, that may help the offense get in some field position, let them get rolling. Even when they came back, when Alfred returned that second half kickoff, there's a glimmer of hope there, I thought, a little bit.
They got maybe within 30 to 20. And
then, boom, it was 37 to 20 before we even knew it.
You know what I think a real turning point was? And it's for the second straight game, they're 2nd and 1. And the week earlier against Winnipeg, they tried the pass to Frankie Hickson behind the line of scrimmage. He slips. They lose yardage. In comes Brett Lawther. A week later, they're 2nd and 1. So the defense is giving you a yard off the ball. So at the absolute worst, you're 2nd and 1. You sneak it twice, you're going to get that first down. Instead, they do a handoff out of the shotgun formation to a running back who's starting to play flat-footed by design, and he's trapped for no gain. At the very least, it should have been 3rd and half a yard to go. And then you get the sneak on 3rd down. But they do the slow developing running play, and the Roughriders do not execute that crisply ever. And so suddenly I guess they were fortunate they didn't lose yardage on that play. But 2nd and 1 becomes 3rd and 1 because they waste the second down. If you're going to run, if you're going to hand off anyway, just do the sneak and get the first down. Yeah. What a ridiculous, unbelievably bad call. And then on 3rd and 1, they try the pass, and it's not caught by Kyron Moore. But they blew a 2nd and 1 for the second consecutive week just simply because of bad scheming. So yeah, people were sick, but how does the sickness absolve 14 more penalties, and how does the sickness absolve just ridiculous strategy in what should be a gimme situation, 2nd and 1 for the second consecutive week? So yeah, they didn't feel well, but they didn't do themselves any favors once again tactically.
Because there were healthy guys on that roster. That's a good rant, Rob. Way to go.
Thank you. I got another one. I want to go off on the Broncos later on.
There were healthy guys on the roster who weren't affected. Like Cody said, he felt a little weak. He didn't feel it badly enough. But I still think on the whole team it impacts you when you're looking around. Like, I know Cody painted a pretty vivid picture of what was going on in there. The one that really caught my eye says, well, there's only 2 bathroom stalls for 45 guys, and half of them are battling flu symptoms. So I thought that was a pretty descriptive one. But
he also told you that it looks like a triage.
I know, like with all the IVs, and just a kudos to the staff and the athletic and the training staff for actually getting a team on the field to
Craig
do that.
Reynolds driving players to Winnipeg so they could play.
Hey, driving's easy. You should try flying to Winnipeg on short notice. It's just, I can't say how Dalagala got there because you can't get to Winnipeg from Regina straight. So you got to go to Calgary, and then Calgary to Winnipeg. And
we're more than 100 years past Orville and Wilbur, and we still can't fly from Regina to Winnipeg.
We used to be able, before COVID, there used to be a direct flight. And I'm just going to add a little quick thing. When I flew to Calgary back on Sunday, my plane landed at gate A17. Okay, my next flight took off at D71, which literally was almost in Canmore. So
did you need a flight to get from gate to gate so you could fly out?
And so I'm hustling along, and then there's one of the TSN camp. You have these little sort of mini shuttle buses that go between all the gates and stuff. And he held the shuttle bus for me so I could get there in time. Also, I had to mention I only had 20 minutes between flight. So they're already starting to board when I was getting off my plane. So it was an interesting time. Doing it again, coming back in a couple of weeks. Rob, what do we think, on more of a note, what does a 6-7 record say about this team? Does it say exactly embarrassing?
It's embarrassing. In an ordinary year, maybe you could look at all the circumstances and considering they've had a COVID outbreak, and now they've had this, and they've had an inordinate number of injuries. But in a year when the Grey Cup is to be played in Regina, and when you remember where the bar was set in 2013, and oldsters like me remember how it felt in 1995 when the Riders didn't put a competitive team on the field in a Grey Cup year, it's nothing short of embarrassing for the organization. Now they have time to fix it, but time is suddenly becoming precious. They've got only 5 games left, and they're in dire peril of finishing with a losing record. And people think some people think that going through the East in the playoffs is a tap dance to the Grey Cup. But last time I checked, the Riders got blown out when they went to Montreal, and they're 0-2 against Toronto. So where is this preferred path to the East?
And no one's done it yet.
Nobody's done it yet. The Riders have come closer than anybody in 2017, but Cody Fajardo kept the Riders out of the Grey Cup. So with the 1-yard quarterback sneak for Toronto. So it's embarrassing. It's not, the book is not closed, but we're getting really close to the epilogue and the acknowledgments, and they've got to do something. And I look and I don't see reinforcements coming in for the area that has been the biggest liability for the second consecutive year, that being the offensive line. Week after week after week after week after week, they trot out that offensive line, which actually performed surprisingly well last week, considering how sick everybody was. And nothing changes. Where are the NFL cuts? Where's a move to address the offensive line? And that, to me, might be ultimately what resonates. If the Riders can't fix it and address reverse their fortunes, they've now lost 6 out of 8, including 4 in a row at home. Mm-hmm. If they can't reverse it, I think this one is going to be remembered as a year in which Jeremy O'Day, despite making, I think, useful additions in various areas of the team, did not address what was clearly the primary deficiency after the 2021 season.
It's still early in the morning. I'm trying to remember their record in 13. What was their record in 13?
They were 11-7.
Okay, so that's a little. So do you think this team can get to 9-9?
Well, part of it depends, Murr, on what's at stake for Calgary during the last 2 games of the year. Suppose that Winnipeg's going to finish first. Suppose that the BC continues its descent. For all we know, Calgary may have locked up second place and hosting in the West semifinal by the time the Riders play those final 2 games. And then I think that changes what's at stake for the Roughriders. Does Calgary put its A team out there, or do they rest for the playoffs? And if Calgary's assured of second place without any possibility of mobility up or down, then I think that's a different Calgary team than the Riders are facing if there's something at stake for the Stampeders, and maybe Calgary's more beatable than they would otherwise be. So, but if you look at it at face value and say that 3 of the remaining 5 games are against the top 2 teams in the West, that really is, I think, finishing with a 9-9 record is a tall order. They're what's the likelihood of them going to Winnipeg and winning? And if they got to try and beat a Calgary team that's right now is 8-4 and has lost 3 times to Winnipeg by a combined 16 points, all of them being a 1-possession game, you compare that to the Roughriders. I don't see a path, all things being equal, to 500 for this football team.
I also think Winnipeg just needs. Yeah, I agree with you. I think Winnipeg's also needs a win to clinch a home playoff game this weekend, I think, or an Edmonton loss. So that's another part of the equation, that Winnipeg is going to be in the barn, before September's out, which is going to be kind of crazy. They'll have so many opportunities to get rested and get healthy and keep winning and all those things. So Winnipeg is not going to be. No one's going to catch Winnipeg. I think we can say that, Rob. Safely say that.
Yeah. The only fear for Winnipeg is that how long do they lose an edge going, potentially more than a month without playing a game that really matters. Although last year they had it wrapped up pretty early, it didn't seem to hurt them in the playoffs. But
they're just so good, Rob. I know we're supposed to talk about Riders, but you can't help but marvel at the culture there, everything that's in place from having sandwiches for the media on the walkthrough day to, the players being treated right, the players wanting to live there. Willie Jefferson, I chatted with him, loves it there. Absolutely loves living in Winnipeg. And it shows in his play. Like, he was a monster on Saturday again. Just the Willie Jefferson just dominates things. Like, and he's a player of the week where he had 3 defensive tackles, 2 sacks, and I think another tackle for a loss. Just dominated the game. So did Jeff Code in his own way. But do you see
hasn't Winnipeg
weakness
become what the Riders aspire to be? Hasn't Winnipeg become what the Riders used to be?
Yeah.
I mean, they're the model franchise in every way, and I don't know. Suddenly, I think the Riders have to look at Winnipeg and how they're doing things. I don't think this is a revelation and say, well, that's where the bar is set. That certainly has been performance-wise, but I think they've got such a rock-solid organization there. The Roughriders have long been considered the CFL's flagship franchise, and I think what's happened the last couple of years has really, really altered things.
And it was amazing there on Saturday. Like, there's always a little sort of debate who's the loudest fans, and we don't quite get the full volume at Mosaic Stadium because we're in the aquarium. That's a press box that we can't really hear. But at Winnipeg,
and they never serve fish. Sorry, but they continue to flounder.
Flounder. All right. Just for the halibut, we'll let that one go.
Sorry.
What was the time? Oh, yeah, the Winnipeg, the windows are open, so you're right out into the crowd, and you can hear the screaming and the noise, and it's just so. Are they the league's loudest fans? Based on my experiences sitting outside with them, yes. And it was just crowded. It took more time to get in there. So it's like I've been to a lot of banjo bowls, and it hasn't been felt as full. It was full. It was full for this game, and it was a pretty cool atmosphere. So it's a pretty cool atmosphere in Regina for the Labor Day Classic. But Rob, I'm going to throw this at you because it's been brought up to me a number of times. When do we stop calling it the Banjo Bowl? Is it? I think I do it because I think it's kind of cute and it's a good way to differentiate it from the Labor Day Classic and stuff. And it doesn't bother me to be called in, but I know Troy Westwood's tongue was firmly planted in cheek and that was fine. But can we move it on to like Michael Ballsy's proposing is the Labor Day rematch, and then maybe move it on because this is I got a letter from a guy who said that this is insulting.
I think what they need to do is actually build on it. The Roughriders ignore it. All you're doing is pumping up the CFL. You're pumping up a rivalry. If suppose you come out and just with indignation defend your fans and say, why are we being disparaged in this manner? We're going to go there and we're going to play Al Kabong with the banjos.
Yeah.
You know, this is. I don't think it's a lot different than MMA or boxing, where you try and build a little heat in advance of a game. And this is what doesn't happen often enough in the Canadian Football League. And as a result, I don't think there's a real compelling reason to attend a lot of games, because it can't just be the football that draws people. I think there has to be some intrigue. For example, the Roughriders are playing Edmonton this week. Chris Jones is coaching the Eskimo part Elks. I do that every time. And I never actually get the S out in Eskimos, except there. I always kind of go Eska, oops. And Chris Jones, of course, had been rather candid in his critique of Cody Fajardo earlier this year. Why not come out and say something like, well, we're gonna show Chris Jones this, that. Why not say something to kind of fuel things, to really compel people to attend this game, to make you think that it's a bit of a grudge match, even if it's contrived. At least do something to create some intrigue for a game that is otherwise devoid of it. And that's where I think the Roughriders, the league, really fall short. You know, John Hodge made a really good point in the 3 Down Nation podcast a while back after the whole Nacho Gate. He said, well, why didn't the Roughriders have Nacho Night? It's a gift from the heavens, from the marketing heavens. And instead it's, just the same old from a marketing perspective.
They had some nachos being handed out. I saw that a little bit from our aquarium.
Absolutely milk it. What would a minor league baseball?
But then the league fines them, though. But then the league fines them, and how do you celebrate something that the league has deemed that's illegal? How do you turn that into something that's a celebration when it was just fun?
Pull an L Davis. Thumb your nose at the league.
Because I spend most of my day flying on Saturday. Didn't the Stampeders jump into that same area too? I think. I don't know if you saw that game. I think I saw a clip. It looked like the Stampeders jumped into the seating area, which I find it interesting. They have a seating area that close to the field, but that's a whole other thought on things like that. But it just seems to be, I don't know how you promote something that the league has deemed that's illegal. So that's kind of an interesting situation. But I do agree with you.
Let's embrace it. it's an opportunity lost in a season where there are empty seats and huge blocks of empty seats. And the Roughriders should be doing everything possible to try and entice people to go to this game. And instead, it's like, well, Edmonton's here on Friday. They're not very good. The Riders are the home team. They're not very good. So where's the compelling reason to go to that game? Build some heat, and they don't do it.
You don't think come
Marketing
see your 0-4, come see your 0-4 team at home on a Friday night, and it's going to be a little chilly. Is a good enough marketing?
You haven't won a home game in more than 2 months, and
come on.
And here's Chris Jones.
And we have an offensive line that you can't watch. So here goes. That's all the marketing programs.
I mean, it just seems to me that a lot more could be done to not only locally but in terms of the league as a whole to really pump some of these rematches. And scheduling doesn't help them either. For example, the Riders don't play in Ottawa this year. What if the Riders had played in Ottawa and Garrett Marino was going back there, right?
Yeah.
I mean, what a circus that would have been. But it would have been a compelling game. And there just aren't enough compelling games because oftentimes the Roughriders just aren't that entertaining, and they aren't that successful in terms of winning, at least lately. And that has to be a drag on the gate.
We kind of thought the way the schedule is set up, it might draw some more traction and more home games, more home interest, because it's West Division teams, and we thought the Riders would be competitive with these West Division teams. It hasn't quite been that way, that the West Division has kind of dominated them, and I don't think you and I expected that. We thought they'd be pretty good. I'm still surprised at 6-7. I thought they'd be better than that, but we always knew the offensive line was going to be an issue. But there's also been offensive issues, and Cody's been, for most of the season hobbling on his bad left knee, and it's better now. He had a couple spin moves again. I like the Fajardian spin moves. I like to see some of those.
One of them was the Bombers looked like they'd read it.
Yeah, that didn't look very good, but that was still. So what do we think with Cody going forward, Rob? I know I think you and Cody have a special relationship, a little bromance going there, maybe.
Well, I really like Cody. Here's my second rant of the day. Everybody's been on Cody's case all year, right? This offensive line is consistently terrible, and yet everybody blames the quarterback. Okay, how did Aaron Rodgers do this past weekend without protection? Did you see Dak Prescott? Yeah, I mean, Dak Prescott before he got hurt. What was Dallas doing with an atypically bad offensive line? These are two of the I don't think it's really a stretch to say they're two of the top 10 quarterbacks in the National Football League. In one case, one of the top 5, but no protection. And even Dak Prescott and Aaron Rodgers can look like Mike Phipps if they don't have protection. And that's I just think the whole Cody thing is so completely out of context. And I think a lot of the same people who are criticizing Cody would be the first people who would probably malign him were he to decide next year to sign somewhere else. And maybe it has to be a Darian Durant situation. Darian won a Grey Cup here in 2013. In 2014, he got hurt 10 games into the year. Only after he got hurt, I think, was the consequence of not having Darian evident. Because that 2014 season, right down the tubes. 2015, Darian gets hurt opening day, 3-15 record. Only in his absence, I think, was it truly apparent to everybody what a stalwart he was. Maybe Cody has to not be here for people to realize what they're missing. And it would be really sad if it came to that. But that's what's happening. And if a lot of these so-called experts continue to create heat for I think a very good quarterback, despite what people are saying, and an exceptional person, and it drives him out of town. Again, what kind of fan base is this?
So here's a question I had thrown at me on the radio the other day, and I wasn't prepared for it, and my answer I wasn't very unhappy. It was where does Cody rank amongst the current crop of CFL quarterbacks? Where would you put him? And I know and you're thinking. I'll talk while you think a little bit here because I felt it was kind of unfair.
If Nathan Rourke is healthy, well, that is one. Zach Collaros playing the way he has, great. But you know what? If you put Cody Fajardo behind Winnipeg's offensive line, I think you're looking at a different quarterback. Like, that's the thing. It's not just, you're not looking at every quarterback in isolation. You're looking at the quarterback. You have to look at the quarterbacks and consider what's around them. I remember Tom Clements in 1979 behind a bad offensive line. In 7 games of the Roughriders, he threw 2 touchdown passes and 11 interceptions. Before he came to Saskatchewan in 1979, the previous 3 seasons with Ottawa, he looked like a Hall of Famer, won a Grey Cup. As soon as he was mercifully traded away from the Roughriders after 7 games in 1979, he went to Hamilton, resumed playing like a Hall of Famer. Went to Winnipeg, eventually became a Hall of Famer. But without protection, Tom Clements looked like Tom Rosance, and that was the situation. So I think you have to look at the context. Again, with a receiving core that's been substandard for most of the year, with strategy that's questionable, and with an offensive line that is an unaddressed sieve, how can you really, make a compelling case that Cody Fajardo is a lower tier quarterback when he had a lot of those factors in his favor in 2019? He was named the most outstanding player in the West Division and a CFL All-Star. How many Rough Rider quarterbacks have been named a CFL All-Star since Ron Lancaster in 1976? Well, there's Ken Austin in 1990, and there's Kerry Joseph in 2007, and then there's Cody Fajardo in 2019. Very short list. So, are we to just completely pretend that 2019 didn't exist? Are we to look at Cody Fajardo completely out of context? I think that's what's being done. Nathan Rourke will probably be in the National Football League next year. He's an absolute exceptional player, and I loved watching him play, and it was horrible to see him get hurt. Zach Collaros, tons of respect. He proved me as wrong as I've ever been in my life. But look at the people in front of Zach Collaros, and look what's in front of Cody Fajardo. And it's not an all things being equal situation. I would put Cody after a healthy Rourke and Collaros top of the next tier.
Ahead of Jake Maier?
There's a very short sample of work. How did Cody Fajardo look after an equivalent number of starts in the Canadian Football League? The same number of starts that Jake Maier had. Well, guess what? People were talking about Cody Fajardo as this corn dog eating phenom, this tonic, this breath of fresh air, this overnight success story that ended up guiding the Riders to a 13-5 record. There isn't the same body of work with Jake Maier. There isn't the same amount of film. The defensive coordinators don't have the goods on him to the extent that they do on Cody Fajardo. So again, how do you look at Jake Maier with a comparatively scant number of starts compared to Cody Fajardo, who's now in his 3rd year as a starter, and each year he's been the starter here? The receiving core has gotten worse, and the offensive line has gotten worse. Again, the context is completely gone in this discussion. That's what rankles me.
I can tell
evidently.
You.
No, it's just so completely ridiculous.
Well, and the bottom line is we've seen what Jake Delgado could do after that game a little bit in garbage time. He's really all they've got. That's another thing I tell. When people used to rant about Durant, I'd say, "Somebody, they got anything better? This is what you got. He's your best player." And then 13.
Tino Sinceri, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah, exactly. But so, how does Cody get people behind him? I guess does he have to play a little better? What can he do in his game?
He completed 15 out of 18 with a makeshift receiving core and an ailing offensive line last week. So what's he supposed to do? Apologize for the 3 incompletions, one of which was a drop? The week before, he threw an interception. They should have run the ball on that play anyway. And the week before that was the game in BC where he threw for more than 300 yards against a defense that at that point at least was considered to be one of the CFL's best, and one that had forced him to the sideline the week before. So if you look at Cody Fajardo the last 3 games, he's not their problem. They've got a bucket full of problems, quite literally, after the Banjo Bowl or the Bucket Bowl last week. Cody Fajardo is not one of their problems. It's the inability to build around Cody Fajardo that is completely impeding this football team right now.
You know, I just you mentioned Nathan Rourke. What I preach about Nathan Rourke is the more film coordinators gathered on him, the better he got. Like they tried to find ways to stop him, and the only way they could stop him was being hurt. But that's what I liked about Nathan Rourke. He just kept getting better and better with defenses knowing what they're going to do against him, and he just kept improving. And it's still a big loss for the CFL that he got hurt, and I hope he stays another year, a whole healthy year. We get to see what this young guy does. But I think, like you, the NFL is going to come calling. But it also depends on how bad the foot injury is. How fast
We've got to give Sarah Orlesky a shout out.
We do. I was going to tell you that.
She's as terrific as she is as a broadcaster, she is even better as a person. And that's hard to do, believe me. But we saw last week in the telecast the appreciation the due appreciation that Sarah received from the Bombers, everybody. And I think we'd be remiss if we didn't acknowledge that ourselves. And as a Winnipeg Jets fan, I'm glad she's going to Canada's team. But I mean, Sarah Orlesky is an example of how to do honestly, you watch the sideline reporters in the National Football League, none of them's even close to Sarah Orlesky. Yeah. And if you listen to questions that are asked of athletes, and so many of them are absolutely ridiculous, and I've asked my share. You listen to Sarah Orlesky's questions; they're succinct, they are perfectly phrased, and they are always topical. She conducts a master class every time she interviews anybody on how to do it. It's none of this talk about nonsense. So, in terms of what she does, in terms of how she does it, in terms of who she is, the Canadian Football League was very lucky to have Sarah Orlesky involved with it for the number of years that she was, and she will definitely be missed. And Britt Dort's going to do a great job whenever Britt Dort is called upon to be a sideline reporter.
Sarah is also a loyal follower of our podcast. I found out.
Oh my goodness, we have one.
That she Hi, I don't know if we can bring up what we didn't have, but we didn't have a podcast last week due to the events up north, and rightfully so. Our staff was doing an amazing job covering what happened with the stabbings and stuff, so we couldn't have it right. But she kept checking and wondering when we're going to post it. So we do have some loyal followers up there, and she was among her at best. And I know I always tell this one story, and what the heck, it's our podcast. I remember walking or driving to a player availability at Old Mosaic Stadium, and I'm watching this woman go down the sidewalk with a suitcase behind her, this blonde woman. And back then, it's kind of a sketchy neighborhood. And I thought, well, what's this woman doing walking around Mosaic Stadium, albeit at 10 o'clock in the morning? It's not exactly one of the worst times. And I just noticed that. And then when I get into the player ability, I meet Sarah and realize what she was doing. And I just thought, it still stands out. I can picture this blonde hair dragging her suitcase behind her as she's off to do the player availability. A great person for the CFL. We're sad to lose her, and I'm looking forward to seeing what Britt can do too on the sideline. I saw a little bit of her on the weekend, and big step. We've had some pretty big women come through. Claire Hanna was another one. She excelled in the sideline stuff and has gone on to do amazing things in Ottawa and the Olympics and whatnot. So there's these women are inspirational to other women. I think we have to acknowledge that, and we have to celebrate that too, because women are great in sports. I think they really contribute.
We've got to sign off here now. So how's that for an awkward segue? But I've got a meeting coming up. So I've got to read this, or I will not be invited to any future meetings. If you enjoy the podcast, please leave a review and a 5-star rating. It helps us grow the podcast. My dog is now trying to crash the podcast. Isn't she cute? That's Candy. You can subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, or wherever you or Candy get your podcasts. If you'd like to send us a question, you can email me at rvanstone@postmedia.com. We'll read it on the show. You can follow me, Rob, on Twitter at Rob Vanstone, or Murray on Twitter at MurrayLP. Why are you pawing at me, Candy? She's being ignored and she wants attention. So Riders versus Edmonton, Friday, 7:30 p.m. Football weekend in Saskatchewan. Thunder versus Hilltops, 1 p.m. Mosaic Stadium. 7 p.m. Rams and Huskies, Mosaic Stadium. What a terrific weekend for football in Saskatchewan. I hope everybody gets out and enjoys it completely.
Rams and Huskies, 2-0 teams. Remember how crazy it'd be going down in the States if that was the kind of hype? But it's going to be crazy. And so the Thunder and this Hilltops.
This is a Rams team that was last in the coaches poll.
Yes, so, exactly.
Shows how valid that is.
And then a bye week.
People criticize the media for being off base. How about those Canada West coaches? For Murray McCormick and Rob Vanstone, the latter of whom is off base, thank you so much for joining us. And we will, I promise you, do this again next week. Take care, and thanks for being with us.